Welcome to Blender. In this tutorial we'll create this scene. We'll learn the basics of modeling in Blender, learn how to apply modifiers, we'll set up global illumination and dive into creating materials. We'll use basic procedural textures and also add strokes and draw flowers. And this is the scene we'll make in the end. Let's get started. First of all, let's remove the cube, select it and press X or delete key to delete it. Next, press Shift A to bring up the Add menu and select Mesh Cylinder. Press G to move it, and to move it straight up, press C to lock the axis along which it will move. Next, go to the Edit mode by pressing the Tab key. In this mode we can select points, edges or polygons with numbers 1, 2 and 3 respectively. Select the top polygon, press G to move it and press C to move it vertically up again. Next, to make this polygon smaller, press S for the scale command. And let's reduce it in such a way that the side edges have a slope. Staying in the same edit mode, press Ctrl R. With this command we can add subdivisions by adjusting their number using the mouse wheel. In this case I add 2 subdivisions. Switch to top view mode, holding down the Alt key near the extreme position, and then the camera will be automatically magnetized. Now I switch to polygon selection mode and select the side polygons for our future ears in this way. Press E to extrude, and now extrude works along the Z-axis. And we need to extrude them along the X-axis. So I press the X-axis, and we see that the polygons go either one way or the other. And to make them go in opposite directions, press S for scale, and now they'll move away from the center symmetrically. Let's make a ledge like this. And then let's move on to creating the nose. Select the 2 faces in front and create a duplicate by pressing Shift D. Press Y to move it straight forward. Next, let's switch to edge selection mode number 2. Select the central edge and press Ctrl X to delete it. Select the bottom edge, press S to scale it, and lower it a little. Next, select the polygon and press E to extrude it and give the nose thickness. Now to select the entire nose, press Ctrl L to select all the geometry linked with this polygon. And let's press G, Y and move the nose like this. To prevent the cylinder from being so faceted, right-click on it and select the shade Auto Smooth. Now it has become smoothed out. Let's create eyebrows. Go back to Edit mode, press Ctrl R and add a subdivision at the top. I place it like this. Next, select several polygons while holding down the Shift key. And press E to extrude. Now to make the eyebrow flatter, press S for scale and select the Y-axis to scale along it. Let's adjust the position of some edges. And this is the result we have. I would like to adjust the nose thickness a little. So let's move on to creating a door. To do this, go to the Edit mode again. Select 4 polygons in front. Press Shift D and Y key to move them straight forward. Let's separate this geometry into a new object. Press P key and choose Selection. Let's select our cylinder 01 object and rename it door to make the door from it. Duplicate this object and rename it door boolean. We'll hide the first door object and modify the door boolean object to turn it into an arch like this. Go to the edit mode, select the edges in the center, press Ctrl X to delete them. The polygon is angled, so to make it vertical, press S, Y, and then 0, and thus the polygon becomes flat. Press E to extrude. Let's switch to the edges mode and select two corner edges. Press Ctrl B for bevel, and use the mouse wheel to increase the number of faces. The more faces, the smoother the result we'll get. And while the polygons are selected, I'll also press S and Z to pull the arch up a little. Now I'll lower this door down. And let's apply the Boolean modifier itself. To do this, select the cylinder, go to the modifiers, click Add Modifier, and select the Boolean. The difference mode is selected. We select our door boolean as the subtraction object, and we can hide the object itself to look at the result. As we can see, nothing happened, and we can try to use another calculation mode, in this case float. And now we see the result of the modifier. Click the arrow and select Apply to apply the modifier. Now we may delete the door boolean object by pressing X or delete. And let's enable the original object door, which we'll use to create the boards. Let's select every other polygon. In this case, it's one solid piece. That is, if we move these boards, they don't have gaps. To make them appear, select these polygons and press Y key. And now each polygon is separated from each other. Select them all by pressing A. Press S for scale. They are all scaled from one center. Let's open this menu and select individual origins, so that each polygon transforms around its own center point. And in order to make gaps between the boards without changing the height, we lock the x-axis. Now again, to add thickness, press E for extrude. And just push this door inside. We could, of course, leave the door flat, but a recessed one would look more picturesque. Now let's move on to creating windows. When we create an object, it's created at the location of the 3D cursor. So, if we create a cylinder, it will be created at this point. We can move the 3D cursor to where we need to create the object by pressing the Shift key plus right mouse button. And press Shift A for the Add command. Now select the cylinder and it'll be created at this location. Let's go to the Edit mode and set 16 faces for our cylinder. Next, press R and X keys to rotate along the X-axis. Click the scale. Now let's make a small rotation by pressing our rotate key again and locking the Z-axis for rotation. I'll deepen the position a little and turn it a bit more. Now, to make a second window, let's add the mirror modifier. For mirroring, we select our main cylinder as the central object. And thus the modifier mirrors relative to the cylinder. In this case, along the x-axis as we need. Go to the edit mode. And now, by editing one window, we'll automatically get changes on both. So, in order to make an additional polygon, press I for insert. And by moving the mouse like this, we create a thickness. Press E for extrude. And let's deepen our window a bit. Next, to create rivets around the window, randomly select polygons. Press Shift D and press Y key. Then press P to separate our selection. This geometry inherits the mirror modifier from the window, so it has been mirrored symmetrically. Now press E to extrude. The normal axis will be used by default. And now we apply the subdivision surface modifier to these cubes. Right-click and select Shade Smooth. Let's increase the number of subdivisions in the modifier settings. Press S/Y to make them a little flatter. And set the placement on the edge of the window. If they've moved a little bit, we set them to this position. So we're done modeling the windows. We'll also apply smoothing to our windows. So apply the shade Auto Smooth. And let's add the last small detail, this door handle. Press Shift A and create an icosphere here. I'm scaling it. And I make it a little flat. Press S and Y as the axis. Right-click again and Shade Smooth to make it smooth. This is the house we got. Now let's create the ground. Our 3D cursor is at an arbitrary height, so to return it to its original position, press Shift S to bring up the menu. Here we select Cursor to World Origin, and the cursor returns to the 0 point. Press Shift A and create a plane primitive. Press S to scale it. And thus we create the ground around. And now, to create tiles in front of the house, let's move the 3D cursor again by pressing Shift plus right-click. Press Shift A for the Add menu and select the cube. Using the Scale command we set the desired size. And in order to move this cube and it doesn't hide underground, we may move it first along the y-axis and then along the x-axis to even out the position. Or we may press Command G to move and press Shift C. And then the cube will move along the other two axes, except the z-axis. Set the first tile like this. Add the array modifier. And set up the modifier parameters. The offset occurs along the x-axis. and we need the displacement along the y-axis. So we put 0 here and 1 here. We see 1 moves it to that direction and we need to move backward, so we specify -1. This parameter can be selected experimentally. And to create more steps, we increase the count parameter. And thus we get the pathway. Also, changing one object will change all duplicates along with it, which is quite convenient. Now let's set up the camera. For example, we already have a camera in the scene. If not, then press Shift-A again and select the camera. The camera is created where the 3D cursor is located. The position and rotation of the camera are not important to us. Now we're selecting the view that will suit us. And then, by pressing the Ctrl-Alt-Numpad 0 keys, we move the camera to our current view. Select the camera and press G, Z, Z, G, Z, as well as G and X to move it along different axes and edit the view we need. I also set it to a slight tilt, and that's how we set the camera. So now let's move on to setting up the lighting. Let's switch to the rendered mode and here go to the render settings. Select cycles for render engine and GPU as device. Then simply repeat the settings. Turn on the noise to get a smoother result. And we reduce the number of samples while increasing the noise threshold parameters. These are the render settings for the viewport, and these are the settings for the finished render output. Let's also go to the color management settings and choose Chronos PBR neutral to get a more saturated result, which is better suited for a cartoon image. And now let's move on to setting up the light itself. In this case, the light comes from the default light source. We may select it and press delete. Next, let's go back to the camera view. Go to the world settings. By editing color, we can change the lighting of our scene. But we'll click on the yellow dot and select the sky texture, which in addition to the sky itself contains the sun. Here we can rotate the sun so that our house is illuminated from the front. Let's adjust the sun intensity, since there is very strong overexposure right now. Let's also change the sunlight angle by increasing the sun elevation so that the shadow is not so long. We may reduce the total strength to 0.1. This is the result we got. So, we set up the global illumination. Also, to make the shadow smoother and less harsh, we can change the sun size. By increasing the size of the sun, we make the shadow smoother. Let's add a couple of touches to our geometry. The scene has an uneven, slightly embossed structure, unlike our plane. Also, we should have a straight horizon line. And the corner of our plane is straightened. So, we select the plane. Press R, Z to rotate and hide the corner from the side. Next, if we go to the edit mode, we'll see that our entire plane is one solid polygon. And to create relief, we need to add subdivisions. Therefore, in the edit mode, press the right click and select the subdivide. Repeat several times until we get a uniform grid of polygons of approximately the same density. Also, to crop the visible part beyond the frame, go to the output settings and check the render region box. This will allow us to see and evaluate the final frame better. Let's go back to setting up our plane. Switch to the edit mode. Points mode. Now, if we move one point, we see that we get sharp peaks. And we need smooth hummocks. So we enable this tool, which smoothly pulls other points along with it proportionally. Using the mouse wheel, we may adjust the degree of influence on surrounding points. And thus we make our sand embossed and not so flat. Also, to better see what is happening, we can turn off the display of points. At the same time, edit mode is enabled. It's working, so we're kind of working blind. Sometimes this is useful in order to see the final result, which is sometimes overlapped by faces and edges. Let's adjust a bit near the tile. And now the land around the house has become more picturesque. To turn off the display of this grid, go to this menu and uncheck the floor box. Let's also come back to our steps. I would like to push them down a little. And let's move on to the modifiers. Here we make the gaps between the steps a bit wider. And let's add a background. I move the 3D cursor behind the house. Add a plane. And rotate it along the x-axis by 90 degrees. Scaling it. And rotate it towards the camera. This background overlays the sky from global illumination. And on this plane we apply the texture of these streets, symbolizing water. I'll pull the bottom edge up. And thus we got the background. In the next tutorial we'll set up the materials and also give our scene a cartoony look.